the origins of Scrum and the definition of done. This is Brad. Brad is a really talented guy and a valuable employee, but Brad is also a bit of a cynic. He never really bought into the whole Scrum thing. He thought everything was going just fine. To him, Scrum was just management's attempt at trying something different. Brad wonders, why do I have to evaluate my day every day? What's all this phony nonsense about user stories and story points? I mean, I get it, but I don't get it. For Brad's sake, and to put all this Scrum stuff into context, let's take a moment to understand where Scrum comes from. Let's go back, way back before there was Scrum, and look at some terms you may have heard before. Skunkworks, Tiger Team, Agile. Once upon a time, the early 1940s, the Lockheed Company was busy building the A-29 Hudson reconnaissance plane to fulfill a British contract. But the U.S. Air Force came to Lockheed asking them to develop a new type of high-altitude jet fighter to help them stay competitive with the German air fleet. The British allies already had a powerful new jet engine, but now Lockheed needed to put it into a fighter jet plane, and the Air Force wanted it yesterday. Just 1 month later, a group of associate engineers delivered a plan for the plane to the Air Force, and 2 days later, the plan was approved and they were off to the races. Neither the Air Force nor Lockheed typically did anything this quickly. The urgency of this project meant doing things in a new way, starting with keeping the project a secret. They didn't even have a room to work in at the Lockheed plant, so they went off-site, set up a circus tent, and got to work there. As the story goes, the tent was next to a manufacturing plant that released smelly fumes, making the tent a smelly workplace. They liked it this way, though. It kept people away. Their setup got the nickname Skunkworks, not just because of the smell, but because it reminded them of a shack in the popular backwoods comic strip Lil Abner, where Skunkworks was the name of a whiskey still. Lockheed's secretive Skunkworks was a tight, lightweight operation working outside the norms of either the commercial giant Lockheed or the rules and regulations of the Air Force. They didn't have the typical submittal and approval process. They didn't even have a contract with the Air Force for 4 months. They designed and built their first prototype aircraft in record time. They wrote their own rulebook, rules which small teams like Skunkworks have been using ever since. The 14 rules are about keeping the chain of command short, minimum report writing, but aggressive monitoring of costs. The rules laid out rigid controls to control impediments, redundancies, the approval process, and keeping the team motivated. The success of Skunkworks eventually caught the imagination of the corporate world at large, where the idea of an agile team of focused experts has great appeal. In the 60s, the aerospace industry gave us the term Tiger Team, meaning, quote, a team of undomesticated and uninhibited technical specialists selected for their experience, energy, and imagination, brought together by a specific goal. From the intelligence and military community, we get the term Red Team, which is used to describe a team whose job it is to expose security holes. These ideas are the ancestors of Scrum, born out of a desire to work with more agility. In 2001, a group of the world's top software developers and methodologists came together for a meeting of the minds at a ski resort in Utah. With the rapid growth of e-commerce, e-business, and everything web, they wanted to break away from arcane policies and let-in corporate power structures that had come to weigh down real productivity. And much like the Skunkworks aeronautics engineers of the 40s, these software engineers of the 21st century wrote their ideas down for all to share. They called theirs the Manifesto for Agile Software Development, and they named themselves the Agile Alliance. The manifesto begins, "We are uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others do it. Through this work, we have come to value individuals and interactions over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, responding to change over following a plan. Our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. Welcome changing requirements, even late in the development. Agile processes harness change for the customer's competitive advantage. Deliver working software frequently, from a couple of weeks to a couple of months, with a preference to the shorter time scale. Business people and developers must work together daily throughout the project. Build projects around motivated individuals. Give them the environment and support they need, and trust them to get the job done. The most efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within a development team is face-to-face conversation. Working software is the primary measure of progress. Agile processes promote sustainable development. The sponsors, developers, and users should be able to maintain a constant pace indefinitely. Continuous attention to technical excellence and good design enhances agility. Simplicity, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done, is essential. The best architectures, requirements, and designs emerge from self-organizing teams. At regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become more effective, then tunes and adjusts its behavior accordingly. Central to the Agile Alliance was the development of Scrum, and two of its members, Ken Schwarber and Jeff Sutherland, wrote the book on it. The Guide to Scrum is a handbook Scrum teams around the world use. If you're the type of learner who likes to read something to really understand it, you can find their work online. Just go online and search for the Scrum Guide. You'll find it as a PDF. It covers all the topics in this video series. So, if you're like Brad, hopefully this background puts Scrum in its context. And if it doesn't all make sense, maybe reading the Scrum Guide will clear things up for you. Scrum has a lot of its own lingo. Scrum Master, Product Owner, User Story, Increment, Product Backlog, Sprint Backlog, but among the most important terms and concepts in all of Scrum is one we've barely touched on. We've been saving it until the end. The word is done. In Scrum, what is the definition of done? How do we know when the work is done? Because Scrum is all about transparent communication, having a set definition of what done means is key. An effective definition of done creates a shared understanding, avoiding any confusion about the status of a sprint. If the goal of a sprint is to create a product increment, also called a potentially shippable code, we have to ask ourselves, did we finish our feature? In basic terms, we want to ask, is the code complete? Is testing complete? Have you tested performance? Have you tested integration? You want everyone to be confident about you releasing the product, and they will be if it's compliant with your DoD definition of done. The DoD helps teams create the desired outcome, which is good value to users. A well-written DoD gives your team and stakeholders a common set of expectations, so your team may want to include all the stakeholders in the DoD up front. But the DoD does not have to be carved out of stone. It can, and in many cases will, evolve over the course of the project. Let's take a more thorough look at this, because the definition of done is really the ultimate review of Scrum. It's got to be based entirely in fact and reality, which goes over every step of what we've done in Scrum. Were your user stories for your sprint clear and understood by the team? Were the tasks for the stories identified? Estimation would not be accurate if the tasks were not clearly understood by the team. Was there enough time for the product owner to sign off on the user stories after the user acceptance test? Also, was every feature not done during the sprint added back to the product backlog? Was the development, staging, and production environment ready with all the tools and artifacts needed to complete the tasks? That includes continuous integration, automation, test data, etc. Is the design complete? Lack of design may mean that the steps in the tasks have not been thought through, which could result in scope creep or not being able to deliver on time. Did you have unit tests, documentation, and pre-release builds done? Make sure that all the coding for features in the task list are done. Code complete implies that coding is done. Unit testing is done. Code refactoring is done. Bug fixes are done, and the code is checked in. Make sure that automated code reviews for review by a tool like PMD for Java coding conventions are done. Every code that is written needs to be peer-reviewed and approved. Check if coverage metrics have been maintained. If the new code didn't add tests, coverage might decrease. Check if the product metrics, like burndown chart, are updated. Ensure that the product is fully tested before being released into production. Check if functional testing is completed. All kinds of automated and manual testing, as per test cases, need to be completed. Also, make sure that regression testing, load and performance testing, and user acceptance testing are done. If you've checkmarked all the items on this list, phew, you're done. Go home. Have a beer. Of course, your mileage may vary. Every team and every project is different. But hey, we're Agile. We're going to make adjustments. We're going to give it our sincere best effort. So what do you say, Brad? Are you buying in? Cool. But here's the thing. Although implementing only parts of Scrum is possible, the result is not Scrum. Scrum exists only in its entirety and functions well as a container for other techniques, methodologies, and practices. We talked about the origin of Scrum to give it context, in the hopes that it'll help you on your day-to-day implementation of these new practices, new lingo, and new way of working. But before we go, let's touch over one last area, the values of Scrum. No, Brad, not the value, the values. Scrum was conceived to embrace these 5 values, and the more your team embraces them, the healthier and more successful you'll be. Focus. Because we focus on only a few things at a time, we work well together and produce excellent work. We deliver valuable items sooner. Courage. Because we work as a team, we feel supportive and have more resources at our disposal. This gives us the courage to undertake greater challenges. Openness. As we work together, we express how we're doing, what's in our way, and our concerns so that they can be addressed. Commitment. Because we have great control over our own destiny, we are more committed to our success. Respect. As we work together, sharing successes and failures, we come to respect each other and to help each other become worthy of respect. Give it time. As an organization applies Scrum, it discovers its benefits. At the same time, it sees how these values inherently contribute to the success of Scrum and understands why they are both needed and bolstered by Scrum. This concludes our 6-part series on the Scrum framework. Our next series of 4 short videos, Ceremonies of Scrum, takes you inside the Scrum room to witness the events and ceremonies that accompany the Scrum process as they happen.